Hi, English 8 students. This is Mr. Bainey. I wanted to touch base with you. As you know, we are finishing up another project, and we're about to start a new project. This very next project, which is called Dream On, is all about writers using their imagination and kind of stepping out of the everyday life. And one of the things that we see, and I don't know how many of you are fans of it, is science fiction. And there's lots of popular science fiction that's out there. We will talk about a couple of them, but for the most part, really one of the common themes and one of the common things that we find in a lot of science fiction is something called time travel. So let's just assume for one moment that you had the ability to travel in time. Where would you go? And I guess when I say where, like what physical location, but also where in a time of space. So in other words, when would you go? Would you go back in time, maybe to the early American foundations? Would you go to the 16th century Europe? Would you go to, the Dark Ages? Would you go even further back to the Middle East during the time of Muhammad, of Christ? Would you go back even further than that? Or would you go forward in time to the year 3000 or 2500? Or even would you maybe go, just forward maybe 80 years so you could meet your children's children or what have you. So, if you could go back in time or if you could go forward in time, who would you want to meet? Well, I guess it would be impossible to answer about going forward in time, but if you could go back in time, who would you want to meet? Is there like a popular musician? Would you go back and want to hang out with Bob Marley? Would you want to go even further back and hang out with Joan of Arc? Would you want to be a fly on the wall in Hitler's regime and see what caused that? Would you go back and would you stop Hitler from what he did, or stop Stalin? Would you change history? So these are all kinds of fun questions to answer when we talk about science fiction, because it's not going to happen in our lifetime, and I don't even know if it is possible, but it's fun to write about and it's fun to read about. So entirely during this chapter, we're going to talk about science fiction, all right? And science fiction, and as you can see, is nothing more than fiction, made-up stories that are based on imagined future scientific or technological advances and major social or environmental changes. Often they are portraying space and time travel or life on other planets. So, there's a couple popular ones. Avengers, which is, although it's a superhero movie, there is some science fiction to that. Star Trek was probably one of the early ones where I never watched Star Trek, but I think they just drove around and, or not drove around, but floated around the galaxies, and I think they did good deeds. Star Wars, obviously, is probably one of the more popular ones. Dune. I know there's one called Ender's Game. There's A Wrinkle in Time. So we have all of these popular stories, okay? Specifically, what we're going to talk about in this one, right off the top of the bat, is something called A Sound of Thunder. And this was a story written by a guy named Ray Bradbury in 1952. And it takes place in the year 2055. And at that time, time travel is a real possibility, according to the book. And it's basically a story about a group of men, in fact, really rich men, who travel back into the dawn of time to go on a dinosaur safari hunting trip. And they kind of learn quickly about how what they do back then can make a huge impact on what we have now. And it's really, there was also a popular book and movie called The Butterfly Effect, which basically means, a butterfly fluttering its wings in America could very well cause a tsunami in Indonesia, and just how all things are interrelated. So, and I think that you'll like this story. So we're going to hop right into that at checkpoint 1. So all I want you to do, if you would please, is come back to this page, and I want you to answer those questions, all right? And you can just post them and send them to a class comment. So if you could go back in time and travel anywhere, where would you go? Who would you want to meet? Or what event would you want to visit? And if you had the possibility to change history, would you? So, all right, thanks. Bye.